Anthony Joshua has been called the king of the heavyweight division for years, but in London, at the funeral of two of his closest friends, that aura of invincibility disappeared. What we saw instead wasn't the dominant champion who walks into arenas with fireworks and belts. It was a man carrying a kind of grief that even the strongest body can't protect you from. This goodbye was always going to be painful, but the scale of it showed just how deep the loss runs. Thousands of people gathered in the United Kingdom to pay their last respects to Sina Gami and Kevin Latif Lats Ayodele, the two men who died in the car crash in Nigeria. It was more than a funeral. It felt like a national moment of mourning around one of British sport's biggest figures. The emotion in the air went way beyond the usual tributes you see when a public figure suffers a loss. This was raw, close, and deeply personal. The accident itself happened in Nigeria, and the details are as heartbreaking as they sound. Joshua was traveling in a vehicle with Gami, Ayodele, and the driver when they were involved in a collision. Both Gami and Ayodele were killed. Joshua and the driver survived. That single fact, that he walked away while two men he considered family did not, has added an extra layer to all of this. It's not just grief, it's the harsh reality of how close he came to sharing their fate. By the time the funeral took place in London, the weight of what had happened had clearly settled in. As Joshua arrived at the mosque, huge crowds lined the streets and gathered outside the entrance. They weren't there for a fight, a press conference, or a title announcement. They were there to stand with him in one of the darkest moments of his life. Many in the crowd simply wanted to show support, to let him know he wasn't alone as he prepared to say goodbye to two of the most important people in his inner circle. Even in that sea of faces, Joshua's behavior stood out immediately. This is someone who was used to moving through crowds with confidence, signing autographs, taking photos, joking with fans. But on this day, all of that faded. He was serious, distant, almost frozen in place at times. He offered only brief acknowledgments and small gestures, a nod here, a quiet greeting there. It was as if the entire situation was too heavy for normal conversation. You could see in his face that there are moments when words don't really help. Footage from outside the mosque spread across social media within hours. People shared clips of Joshua surrounded by supporters, but locked into his own thoughts, his posture rigid, his expression subdued. For someone so used to being filmed, this was a very different kind of spotlight. There were no bright lights, no ring walks, no gloves, just a man in mourning, visibly carrying pain that he's not used to showing in public. Inside the mosque, that emotional strain only deepened. As mourners gathered to pay their respects to Gami and Ayodele, Joshua tried to stay composed, but those who were present could see how much he was struggling. This wasn't about losing business partners or casual acquaintances. Gami and Lats were part of his core group, people who had been by his side through some of the most intense moments of his boxing career. They were the ones behind the scenes, in the gym, in the hotel, in the dressing room, the kind of people who see an athlete at their strongest and their weakest. Anyone who understands boxing knows how tight those circles become. Your team is your family. They travel the world with you, they share your victories, they help you recover from defeat, and they're there in the aftermath of brutal training camps and physically draining fights. To lose two of those people in a single instant, in circumstances where you yourself survived, has added an extra layer to all of this. It's not just grief, it's the harsh reality of how close he came to sharing their fate. The timing of this tragedy only made it more jarring. Not long before the accident, Anthony Joshua ended his year on a high, dominating Jake Paul in one of the most talked about fights in recent memory. That bout was sold as a spectacle, and Joshua delivered, walking away with a decisive victory and reminding the world of the gap between an elite heavyweight and a crossover attraction. The win gave him momentum, confidence, and the feeling that a new chapter in his career was opening. But any feeling of celebration was brutally short-lived. Almost immediately, the conversation around Joshua shifted from knockouts and future opponents to survival, loss, and mourning. One moment he was being discussed as the man who had just handled business in the ring. The next, he was being mentioned in the context of a deadly crash in Nigeria. That kind of emotional whiplash is hard for anyone to process, let alone someone who is already under constant public scrutiny. The funeral in London showed a side of Anthony Joshua that people don't usually see.
In the ring, he is known for his power, his composure, and his ability to get up when he's been knocked down. Outside the ropes, he's often presented as calm, gracious, and in control. But at the mosque, surrounded by thousands, he looked like what he is underneath all the titles and endorsements, a human being trying to process something overwhelming. There were no motivational speeches, no bravado, nothing to suggest that he was trying to stay strong in a performative way. Instead, his pain was visible in the way he withdrew him to himself. You could see it in how he held his body, how little he engaged, how heavy each step seemed. For someone whose image has so often been built around strength and resilience, this public vulnerability was striking. It's important to remember that Gami and Ayodele were not just physically present in Joshua's life. They played a key role in helping him navigate one of the most dangerous professions in sport. Boxing, especially at heavyweight, is unforgiving. Every training camp, every sparring session, every fight night carries risk. The people around you are the ones who help manage that risk, from trainers to close friends who keep you grounded mentally. Their loss leaves a gap that can't just be filled with new faces. It's emotional, practical, and deeply personal. When people talk about boxing family, this is what they mean. It's not just a phrase for the cameras. It's the reality of years spent together, moving through both success and failure. The bond that forms in those environments is more like that of siblings than coworkers. To stand at their funeral knowing you were in the same vehicle that took their lives adds a layer of heartbreak that is difficult to fully grasp from the outside.
What we're seeing now is a pause in Joshua's life that has nothing to do with contracts, training plans, or title fights. For the first time in a long time, his immediate future isn't defined by a training camp or a date on the boxing calendar. It's about healing, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Boxing fans, promoters, and commentators may already be wondering what this means for his career, but from everything visible right now, that feels secondary. For now, the biggest challenge in front of him isn't another heavyweight across the ring. It's waking up every day and learning how to live with what happened in Nigeria. It's figuring out how to move forward when your daily reality includes the knowledge that two of your closest friends are gone and that you were there when it happened. It's dealing with the images, the memories, the what-ifs that come after any tragedy where some live and others don't. The way the public has reacted to this moment also says a lot about Joshua's place in British culture. On fight nights, he's a sporting attraction, but in this moment of grief, he feels more like a national figure people genuinely care about. The scenes outside the mosque, the crowds, the quiet respect, the shared emotion are the kind of images usually associated with national mourning around major public figures, or even members of the royal family. It underlines just how deeply he has become embedded in the public consciousness over the years. The support around him is strong, but grief is still a very personal process. No matter how many fans line the streets or send condolences online, he's the one who has to live with the silence left by Sina Gami and Ayodele. He's the one who will walk into gyms, cars, and familiar settings and feel their absence in ways that most of us will never hear about. From the outside, it can be tempting to look for meaning or lessons in tragedies like this, especially when they involve a high-profile figure. But sometimes there are no neat answers. This accident didn't happen in a ring, after a punch, or during training. It happened on the road, a cruel reminder that life's biggest risks don't always come from the places you expect. For a man who has spent his life preparing for danger inside the ropes, to be broadsided by something like this away from boxing has to be especially disorienting. What is clear is that this moment will shape Anthony Joshua in ways that go far beyond sport. Whether he chooses to keep fighting for years, step away sooner than expected, or change the pace of his career, this loss will be a reference point. It will influence how he sees success, how he values time with those he loves, and how he balances his public role with his private needs. For the wider boxing community watching from a distance, this is a sobering reality check. We're used to measuring fighters by knockouts, belts, and scorecards. We debate resumes and legacies. But days like this remind everyone that behind the statistics and the highlight reels is a person who can be hit by life in ways that no tape study or game plan can prepare them for. Right now, Anthony Joshua isn't chasing another title shot. He's not promoting a big fight. He's grieving two men who stood beside him when the cameras were off, who helped him face down the physical risks of one of the most brutal sports in the world, only to lose their own lives in an instant away from the arena. The contrast could not be sharper.
As fans and observers, the best thing anyone can do in a moment like this is allow space. Space for quiet, space for healing, space for him to decide in his own time what comes next. Whether you follow boxing casually or you've been there for every fight of his career, it's hard not to feel the weight of those images from London. The champion who has faced down giants, standing at a funeral, shoulders heavy, eyes down, surrounded by thousands, yet very clearly alone in his grief. In the end, this period in Anthony Joshua's life will be remembered not for titles or triumphs, but for how he navigates something no amount of training can prepare you for. The man who's been praised for his resilience in the ring is now facing a much more painful test outside of it, and for now, the focus is not on his next opponent, but on how he finds a way to live with this loss and honor the memory of Sina Gami and Kevin Latif Latz Ayodele in the years to come.